You're listening to the Jim Boy Star Podcast, episode 106, titled Dragon Quest the Podcast, Part 3, guest starring Kenshin 1913. And it is time for the final generation of Dragon Quest V, here with Kenshin 1913, aka Pete. What's going on?
Everything's going good.
Good.
We'll be talking Dragon Quest.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you give us a little bit of a what happened at the end of the last episode?
Right, so last time, at the end of the episode, your wife got kidnapped. We go up this tower to find your wife, when there's the bad guy there, and he was one of the guys who killed your dad. We fight him, we find out that your wife is a Zenithian, and pretty much you defeat him, but you get turned into stone, where you and your wife are sold off, and pretty much you are left to pretty much just be a stone statue. Mm-hmm. And we're in this rich man's house where his kid got kidnapped and knocks us over, and we pretty much just sit there for years.
You weren't a very good luck statue.
No, we didn't end up being a very good luck statue. That's right. So what ends up happening is years and years pass by. At least 8 years pass by.
So what age are we now? What age is our main character at this point?
Technically, I guess since this is where it gets tricky. Since he's a stone statue, does he age at all?
Good point. That's a very good point.
Right, if that's the case, then he's pretty much the same age of when he was turned into stone.
Mm-hmm.
But these little kids come over with this guy that's recognizable, and it's actually Sancho, and your 2 kids. They're 8 years old. They come over and they restore you back to life, which is pretty cool. And then they warp you back to the castle, which is also another interesting point, is that your daughter actually has the zoom spell, which used to be sealed away, and now she knows it. So it's kind of like starting to spread this spell.
This new craze called the zoom spell.
Yes. So what ends up happening is you're back at your castle, Gotha. You're pretty much regrouping, figuring out what the heck's going on. You know, now your kids have grown up. They're about 8 years old. They're both 8 years old. You find out that your son, he can actually use the Zenithian sword. So you're like, okay, then he's probably the legendary hero.
I thought he actually straight up says, "I am the legendary hero."
I don't know if he's straight. I know he says, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I can use the Zenithian sword," but I don't think he automatically says like, "Yeah, I'm the Zenithian, or I'm the legendary hero."
Okay.
But so at this point, you go downstairs. Your uncle, he's been pretty much being the regent for the time that you were gone, and he's now pretty much your chancellor. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening is he pretty much tells you that they finally found where your mother was born. It was this place called Lofty Peak, and he tells you, we got you a boat, and you can go over there and you can find her. It's just to the north. So after a little bit, this part is pretty interesting because your castle is now technically your home base, because it has a bank. It has a place where you can recruit, where you can get your monsters. It also has a place where you can get human monsters, or not human monsters, but humans. And at this point, you can actually have Sancho in your group, and you can actually get another character who's a soldier in this place. His name is Twopence, and you can get him in your group too, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. So now at this point, who would you recommend as your group, starting off this third generation?
Starting off this third generation, I usually put in the main character, the 2 kids. I probably have the Slime Knight. I have Sancho. I usually put the human characters in because they're like
party talk.
You get more dialogue out of them.
That makes sense.
And so
did you recruit Dwight at this point?
Yeah, so not yet. We will get Dwight pretty soon. Okay. But so yeah, I usually have him, and then like if you recruit, there's a monster that's outside of Gotha you can get. He's called an Orc King. And he pretty much comes with like a bunch of really nice healing abilities, which are really good to have at this point, especially since like the only 2 characters who can heal really good is the Slime Knight and the main character at this point. But eventually your son will learn like multi-heal and like revive and all that stuff.
It sounds like your son is set to be quite a character.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The only bad thing about the kids, obviously, is that they start on like level 5, so it's kind of hard to be like, level them up in the beginning because they're kind of a little fragile. So you gotta use your monsters in
Mhm.
the beginning just to kind of get them up to speed, and then as soon as they're up to speed, you can pretty much use the kids all day.
Right.
And the daughter ends up being a really good spellcaster. She learns like oomph. She learns like explodent or kaboom. She learns a lot of really
So
great
she's more
abilities.
of a wizard type character,
Yes, yes,
a
she is.
spellcaster, so to speak.
Yeah, and she's a little more fragile than the sun. And the nice thing about the sun too is you can also equip the Zenithian shield on him. So usually after this point, the world becomes or the storyline becomes a little more less linear.
Yes,
So
yeah.
you kind of it's kind of opens up. So what I usually do, the very first thing I do is I go to the desert castle and I
Mhm.
go visit the queen, and she's like, "Oh, where have you been? Oh, look, you have a kid. He kind of got like this weird vibe to him." So she brings him over. You put on the helmet. The helmet doesn't fit the kid, but then all of a sudden it magically shrinks and fits his head. And then she's like, "Oh my God, this is the legendary hero." And at
Right.
this point, she, if you look at like the kid's status bar or whatever or status screen, it'll say his title is legendary hero.
Alright, so that's when
You
it
know,
becomes official.
yeah, that's when it becomes official. So at that point, you could go to a lot of different places. You can actually go back to the house where you were turned into stone if you wanted to. You can go to the auction place where you were actually sold. There's really nothing there. So we're gonna head over to Lofty Peak, which is the birthplace of your mother and where she lived for this long time. And as you're heading there, you go through this big cave. It's big enough to even fit a ship. And there's like a area there that you'll have to figure out later. But at this point, it's the only thing that's about it is just this giant cave. So you go through the cave, and then on the inside of this, like, I don't know what you would call it, but it's like a canyon kind of thing. You
Mhm.
have this town called Lofty Peak. Now, these people are kind of like special people where they have the power to seal monsters and tame them.
Mhm.
But as you talk to people, you find out that your dad came there like a long time ago, and he met her. He met your mother, whose name is Madalena,
Mhm.
and they kind of like fell in love, and they didn't want her to leave. So you find out that your mother was the last like really powerful Loftian, like really powerful, like she had all these abilities, and they wanted to keep her there because they knew that evil was coming back, and they would need her to help seal the doorway to evil or whatever.
Okay.
So your father falls in love, and they kind of leave, and then boom, they're kind of upset, and that's why they were never able to go back. But now that they found out that you're half Loftian, they're like, okay, you can be here. And so some of the items that you find when you're there, you find a magic key, which is the second key, and the flying carpet. And they kind of tell you to look for Zenithia. That's like the big thing. They're like, if you want to find the rest of the Zenithian things, you gotta find Zenithia.
Where are we on our Zenithian count right now? Like, what do we have and what don't we have?
At this point, we have the shield, we have the helmet, and we have the sword. The armor we won't get for a long time.
Okay. And then
So
all of this also during this time, you're also looking for Bianca or whoever you
yes,
chose to marry at that point.
right. You are looking for your wife as well. There's like three little missions going on all at the same time. You're trying to find clues of where they took your wife. You're trying to find out where your mother is,
Hmm.
and actually, I think they kind of say in Lofty Peak that the monsters might have taken her to the evil realm or whatever.
Right.
And then you're trying to find the rest of the Zenithian gear. That's pretty much the three things you're doing.
Hmm.
So so you get so now that you have this magic carpet, this is a new item in the game that like it's a new transport in the game. Pretty much how it works is you can use it and you can fly over the water and you can go anywhere where there's not trees or mountains. So pretty much there's a lot of places you couldn't get to before because there was either land in the way and then water and then land,
Mhm.
so you couldn't get there by a boat. So if you remember where the Knickknackery is, it's kind of like in the center of the world. There's like this giant island in the middle, and you couldn't reach there by boat. So if you took your magic carpet and went there, you would notice that there's this big tower. All right, so over there, you go into the tower, and at this point, there's some really good monsters to recruit here because I know you mentioned you wanted some monsters. So there's a golem there you can recruit. He's a really good attacker and a really
Okay.
good like tank guy. He's pretty easy to recruit. And then finally, the next guy is the King Cure Slime, which he learns really good curing abilities. He's like if you can get him, he's like a broken monster because he gets all the greatest spells or the healing spells.
Does he
And
also? Is there any chance that he has the spell that can bring someone back to life?
oh yes,
Look
he
at
does.
that.
He has revive. He
Is it called
a
revive
multi
anymore,
heal.
or is it called revive anymore? Or isn't it now? Is it called revive? Why do I think it's different? Has it turned into zing and kazing yet?
It's called it's it's just called revive because it's just I don't know that makes sense to me. But so we get into this tower and you notice that it's all broken and stuff. So we climb it, and if you remember from Dragon Quest IV, the layout is pretty much exactly the same. It is the Zenithian Tower.
Okay.
So we get to the top, and we find this old Zenithian guy, and he's just standing there, and he's telling you, you have to find the Zenithian castle because it fell to Earth. And at this point, you're like, whoa, it fell to Earth because that thing used to be in the sky, and wasn't there like a dragon guy protecting it? And he was
Right.
saying how you got to use the magma staff to find the Zenithian castle. So the magma staff is right next to him. You grab it, and then he disappears. And then if you have party talk going, the kids are like, "Oh my god, he was a ghost." So now they want.
You don't want to tell people the name of this man?
Uh, did he have a name?
He 100. Well, I don't know if he had one for the mobile, because I'm not as caught up on that. But in the remake, it's one of the worst names ever in the Dragon Quest series, in my opinion. Or I should say the worst renamings ever, because I don't think he was in the original. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
It's Doctor Dr. and then Agon, Agon.
Oh yeah. We haven't met him yet. That is a terrible name.
Oh, this isn't him?
No.
I got my people.
This is the old man in the tower. This is the old man in the tower.
Oh,
and so
okay.
from there's a spot like that's south of Lofty Peak. It's like the spot, and if you're using the magic carpet, you actually see a castle in the lake, and then there's this area. It's a cave that's covered with rock, and you can't get over there, so you have to use the magma staff there. And then inside this place, it's called the Diggery Pokery. I used to just call it the minecart place because it had all these minecarts. We meet a guy here who in the new game he's called Dr. Agon. So it's like, what? It's like,
So
come on.
dumb.
It's a bad name. I forget what his name was in the original.
Well, if they were smart, they probably did, and they probably were on the original. They probably didn't even give him a name. They probably call him like Mysterious Man.
Yeah, but he's like the bartenders look like in the game.
Yeah.
So he talks like one thing I do admit that I do like in the remakes is that he talks like Ned Flanders.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I love it, and he's like Heidi ho, kind of stuff, oakley dokley, And so he's talking about how he's been stuck there for like over 30 years, just going around in this minecart, and everyone's like, how the hell did he not get old? One. And how the hell is he like alive? Because obviously,
everyone else is dead. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you'd have food or water or whatever. But so you take this guy with you, and you finally get to this minecart that takes you like on a really cool roller coaster ride through this water, through everything, and then you fall down into the water. And in this area, you actually go into the Zenithian castle, which has been waterlogged, and pretty much there's nothing there. And there's like one set path that you can go, and you go up to the throne room, where if you search behind the throne room, a la most other Dragon Quest games, there's a staircase, and down the staircase is where these two orbs are. And the reason why the castle has fallen into the water is because one of the two orbs, the golden orb, has disappeared. So pretty much the Dr. Agon, he like senses, he does like this thing where he like tries to find out where the orb went, and it pretty much relives everything from the first generation in the essence of the orb. The castle was up in the sky, and then like this evil force kind of like seeped up until it hit the castle, and then an orb fell down.
Mm-hmm.
And then the orb fell down on the tower that Bianca and you, or the castle that Bianca and you were dealing with, the Upperton Towers.
Right, in the first episode
Yes.
of this little series, and I'm glad that to find out that actually meant something.
Yes, it was pretty cool. I'm glad that like it kind of comes full circle. And so the you find out that you actually had that orb back when you were a kid, and then they kind of show you talking to this older guy who you show him the orb, and then they show the part where your dad dies, which is kind of like, oh man, more salt and
remember this.
Yeah, more salt in the wound. And then you see Bishop Laja just break it, and then it goes it goes back to Dr. Agon, and he's like, oh no, the orb's been destroyed, and then he's trying to think of some way that we can get a new one. And pretty much he figures out, oh, the only way we're gonna do that is if we get the fairies to help. So at this point, you have to kind of figure out where you can go to find the fairies, and it what is it? Pretty much you find out that like the fairies are in this place. See, this is one weird spot where I don't remember exactly how you know to go to this area, but you have to go to this forest. It's called the Never Glade.
Right.
And pretty much there you have to bring one of the two kids, because if you remember from even the first generation, only little kids could see fairies, right?
Correct. Yes. Because we were wondering what their end game was, to find the one kid in town.
Right. And so you pretty much have to go to the Neverglade, and from there it's like this never-ending dungeon, like a infinite loop kind of thing. And so from there you walk around and you finally find a fairy, because the kids see it, and then you have to follow the kids to get to the fairy palace, where we get to the world that the world where we were at before, when we saved the fairies in the first generation. And we find out that they're doing pretty good. Everything in that area has changed, and it's pretty much it's pretty much springtime. So you find out that the lady who lives there, who rules this place, her name is Treacle. She the fairy who lives.
I thought I lost you there for a second. You still there? Yeah. You're breaking up a bit. I noticed that before too.
Oh. Well, let's see.
That's all right. That's it. You're good. You're good now. I mean, it might have been something out that I did on my side. I'm not that sure, but yeah. So we're back here. We're doing fairy things again.
Yes, we're back in the fairy lay, and what ends up happening is we talk to Treacle. She's the leader of the fairies in this area, and she mentions that you have to go and see the fairy queen, who's on the other world, and she will help you get the ball. So at this point, it's optional, but you can go back to the dwarf cave, and you meet Dwight. You meet Dwight, and you find out that his grandfather died, and that he would like to join your group because he's got nothing better to do. So at this point, you can actually have Dwight join your group, which is pretty cool.
And do you have any idea of his stats?
In the beginning, he starts at level 1, and his stats are pretty awful.
Mm-hmm. But then doesn't he get better?
But
doesn't he get?
If you do level him up,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, he does get a lot better. He actually is very versatile, because he actually has a lot of healing. And he's a pretty good attacker. I would say he's almost on par to even Twopence, the soldier guy. If you want to switch him out, he's pretty much on, and he gets the option of different weapons as well, which is cool. So you find out about where the fairy palace is. It's in this lake area. that's surrounded by mountains, and so it's pretty much north of the Zenithian Tower. So you head back over there, and then you head north. And oh yes, I'm sorry. So at the fairy place, she gives at Fairy Lay, she gives you a horn to blow for when you find this area where the castle is, and that'll help reveal the castle.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to this place that's this lake that's surrounded by mountains that's inside a forest. And so you go there, you blow the horn, and ta-da! Here is the fairy castle.
Mm-hmm.
And over here, you find out about a lot of things. You find out about the hero and how legendary hero just can't be born out of Zenithian people. It has to be like a right mix of certain blood types. So that's why your son is the legendary hero, because the Lothian blood and the Zenithian blood mix to become the right mixture, or whatever. And then you learn about like Bianca or any of the wives at this point, any of the wives, that how they were like all three of them are technically Zenithian daughters of Zenithia kind of thing.
Now,
So
do we know like if their lineage goes back even to someone in Dragon Quest IV?
I don't know. Probably, I would assume that like they might be some sort of familiar line from the hero in Dragon Quest IV. I definitely think that the queen in the desert castle is actually a descendant of Nera or Mera.
Okay.
Because they talk about how they used to travel with the hero back in the day, and they found this desert and they decided to settle here.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about how it used to be a long line of beautiful queens. So I was like, that makes sense that that it might be Nera or Mera.
All right.
Yeah, but yeah, they definitely could be descended from the first hero. And this game does take in the timeline. It does take place after Dragon Quest IV, like in the timeline.
Oh, it does. It's not an actual prequel to 4.
No,
Since the castle's down, I actually thought it was that route where they restore the castle and then it's there for Dragon Warrior 4, and then I don't know where Dragon Quest 6 falls into things, only because I don't remember that much from Dragon Quest 6.
Right.
Because I didn't even know until talking to you and starting to do these Dragon Quest specials that 4, 5, and 6 were somehow linked to each other. Didn't even know that.
Yeah, they are linked. I don't want to let it go at this point because it's kind of a little spoilery, but
yeah, no problem.
five definitely takes place at 4.
Uh-huh.
So we get this horn, we blow at the fairies, and then she pretty much says that she doesn't have the power to make another orb, but she gives you like this gold bauble, which is pretty much a ball or whatever. And so at this point, she says that she wants you to go check these paintings that they were painted. And so you go upstairs and you see one painting, which is of your son, and it says, oh yeah, this is the painting of the legendary hero. And then you look at the other painting. It's a painting of Wheelbrook. And then all of a sudden, magically, you're transported back in time to Wheelbrook before it was destroyed. And you are actually that was walking around town back in Generation 1 that everybody was talking about. So you kind of realize this, and you go and you meet your younger self, and you ask him, hey, can I see that ball? You take the ball, you do like a ta-da magic kind of trick, and you give him the fake ball. So
okay.
You've done the old switcheroo. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, if I can change that, maybe I can tell my dad not to go to what the hell, Cogburg.
Yeah, the castle, yeah.
So if you go over and you talk to him, there's a lot of little pathways on this conversation when you have with him. But he's like, you talk to him and he says, who are you? And you're, oh, you claim to be my son? And then you say yes. And he's like, you must be kidding. And then you try to tell him not to go to Cogburg. And then he's like, oh, all right, I'll keep your thing in mind. And honestly, it doesn't change anything, which sucks because it'd be kind of cool. But what are you going to do? So at that point, you leave town, and then you're kind of like put back in your own body, and you actually have the gold orb.
Right.
So now you can head back to Zenithia, and you give Dr. Agon the orb, and pretty much you make Zenithia come up into the sky again. So it's not as high as it used to be, where it was really high up in the sky, but it is pretty high where we can actually control the castle.
Right.
So at this point, we find out that there's all these Zenithians that somehow magically didn't drown or whatever, and they're in the castle, and you can talk to them, and they kind of tell you about the fall of Zenithia and where's the Zenithian dragon. And one guy gives you this thing. It's called a grappling hook, which you need to use later. But you actually have the ability to use the castle to fly all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, there's a lot of optional things you can do. And at this point, if you really want to, you're probably on a good level to do this. If you go back to where Monster, what's it called?
Oh, Monster Ferrado or whatever it is.
Yeah, if you go there, you'll actually be met by your well, it depends on if it's your wife or not. But anyways, you'll be met by Mr. Briscoletti, where he's talking about how he's really nervous, and he's like, "Oh, go someone double check that jar again."
God, this guy in the jar.
Yeah, he is really obsessed with it. So you find out, you go over and you talk to, like, at this point, if you married Bianca, if you go into like the house where you stayed at when you got married, you'll find Flora or Nera and Crispin are there. They got married, which seems right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That seemed like the thing. And they pretty much ask you to go see what's going on with their dad. And you go over there and you talk to him, and he's really worried. And then you find out that through a diary that one of the people have you read, that his great grandfather or whatever sealed away this massive beast in this jar, and if the seal ever starts glowing red, that monster is going to come out. So you kind of like, okay, we're going to help him out. You go up to this jar, you find out that it's red. You go back to the town where a soldier says Mr. Briscoletti is going to be waiting for you at this tower called LaGuardia, which I think is kind of funny because it's like, it's LaGuardia and LaGuardia Airport or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
I have a question, though, in regards to this. So before all of this, he didn't have anyone that went to the jar on a daily basis before you showed up?
I guess he didn't. I mean, I think he might have figured that the jar would have stayed blue for quite some time.
Imagine, like, you're in that situation. I would 100% make sure I paid someone, maybe even to go twice a day, once in the morning and once at night, to see what's up.
I would definitely paid someone to look at it at least once a week, definitely.
Oh, see, I think it's a bit generous. I would go at least twice a week, at least.
Yeah, because it'd been like, this is my livelihood.
It's not only your livelihood, it's like the whole world's, well, I don't know if that might be a bit extreme, but at least the town's livelihood.
Yeah, and it's like you gotta make sure that that this monster doesn't come out again, and even if it does, it's like you gotta make sure you're prepared. You know what
would be great is if you chose to marry, what's her face? I just can't think of her name right now. You just said it.
Nera?
Yeah, if you chose to marry Nera, and then you start doing this, like the hero all of a sudden says, "What kind of family did I marry into?"
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, if you married Nera and you went back there, Crispin actually marries a totally different person. It's like a dancer lady, and she's in there, and he pretty much asked you the same thing. He like asked you to check out what's going on with Mr. Briscoletti. And if you marry Deborah, obviously Nera and Crispin are still in there. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, you head up to the tower, and Mr. Briscoletti is like, keep an eye out on the horizon, because I'm going to go get my gear on, and then I'll come back and help you fight him. So what ends up happening is he leaves, and then all of a sudden, this giant monster comes shooting out of the jar, and he's walking across the area. He's like the biggest monster you've ever seen in any of the Dragon Quest games. Mm-hmm. And like in the remakes, they do a really good job of showing how large he is, and he pretty much just goes, he's towering over towers, all this stuff. So he gets over, and he's like, "Hey, where's the Briscoletti guy?" And he's like, "Ah, that's all right. I'm gonna kill you instead." So you have to fight this guy.
Right. Now,
And
do you think that he's harder than the main boss?
no, no, no,
Not
no.
at all.
This
Okay,
guy,
not even close. Okay.
no, this guy's tough, but he's not that hard because you actually in the long run you have to actually fight him. I always thought that this was an optional
I always
thing.
thought it was too until you just said that.
Yeah, but you have to fight him, otherwise you can't get a couple of things, and you can't actually progress with the story at one point.
Oh. What do you
Yeah.
get from him? So you beat him, and what do you get?
You get the ultimate key, which you do need to open up
Oh, okay.
to where you have to get to to get to the final area of the game. So he's not too tough. I mean, you just use like sap a bunch, and because he's always trying to buff his defense, make his defense higher. So if you have someone who has sap and you have someone with insulate, you'll be fine. So we beat him. Mr. Briscoletti comes back, and he's so happy that you beat him, and he's so pumped. I don't think he gives you anything, but he's just so happy that you did this. But honestly, the ultimate key is reward enough. So at this point, we have ourselves the ultimate key. We have ourselves a flying castle, and we hear about how we need to get the Zenithian dragon back. But we heard that in Zenithia that he pretty much he sealed away his powers. So in this tower. So we head over to this island that's in the southwest area of the map, and it's surrounded by mountains. So we land our castle and we head to this tower. And the interesting thing is that the doors are locked, and even if you have the ultimate key, you can't get in. So you gotta go up this tower, up, and then you gotta use the grappling hook, which you got from Zenithia, to go down. And as you're going down inside the tower, you actually hear about you hear from I guess it's a Zenithian that's hanging out there. A dead Zenithian says something like, "Oh boy, they stole the dragon."
You there?
And then they die.
Oh, say that again because you cut off a little bit.
Yes.
There.
Oh, sorry. So you get to Zenithian, or you get into the tower, and you meet a Zenithian, and you find out that this person's dying, and they pretty much say that they're these dragon eyes that they stole, and you don't know what the heck they're for yet. And he's like,
Right.
these two powerful monsters stole the dragon's eyes. So you gotta head down. You get to the base of the tower, and you can open the door. So now you can leave and come back whenever you want. But in the center of this tower is this huge dragon head that you could probably get inside, maybe, but you don't know that yet. So you head downstairs, and you meet one of the monsters, Slon. I think his name is Slon, Slon. Slon. He's called Slon the Rook, and you meet him, and he is the second monster who killed your dad, who helped kill your father.
Right, that's what I was gonna bring up too. Okay.
Right. So it's sort of like, all right, we're gonna get some more revenge, and then you pretty much fight him. He's fairly easy. You beat him handily, and he dies. And then you get one of the dragon's eyes. So you continue to explore the basement of the tower, and then you find Bishop Lodja, and he talks about, "Oh, do you remember me? Da 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 da. I killed your father," kind of thing. And you fight him at this point, and he can be pretty tough. But if you're well equipped and all that stuff, he's not too hard. So you beat him, and in the original game, you actually kill him at this point. But in the remake versions, he actually lives, which is, I think,
that's weird.
Which I think is better in the long run, because he becomes useful in another part later, and it makes him more of a dick. So. Yeah. He leaves the Dragon Eye. He says, "Oh, even if you beat me here, you haven't really beat me because you'll never get back, blah, 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 blah." So now you have these two eyes. You go back up the tower. There's this big dragon statue. You put the eyes in the tower, or in the statue, and the thing opens up, and there you get the dragon orb, and you get the dragon, staff, which is the hero's best weapon, or the main character's best weapon.
Right, I was just going to say, because that's the twist. You're not the hero for this one.
Yeah, and you are actually more of a staff user than a sword user, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's true, too. That is a little bit different. I never realized that.
Yeah, and so now you go back to Zenithia, and you find out that that they're trying to arrest Dr. Agon. because they're like, oh, we don't know who he is. So you give him this orb, and he turns back into the Zenithian dragon. And honestly, this is a surprising point if you don't know his name. But when they give you his name in the new version, it's like, okay. but like in the original version,
right,
you're
sure,
like,
you're shocked about it.
Yeah, a little bit. You're like, oh my god, this guy. So he gives you this bell that you can use to summon him. And actually, this is the fourth thing that you can. The fourth mode of transportation is you actually get to fly on the Zenithian dragon, which I think is pretty cool.
I wonder what the record is of. Like, I don't think we can answer it now, but we'd have to do the research on what's the Dragon Quest games that have the most amount of modes of transportation.
It would probably, just quickly, I think it would be 6 because there's 2 worlds and they give you 2 versions of everything up there.
Ah, that's true. All right.
Yes. So, you get to fly on this dragon. Now, there's another spot in the game that's optional. I'll mention it quickly. It's called the Mantle Place. And you can go there even before you have the dragon. But at this point, if you go there, you can get the best armor in the game for the main character. And in this dungeon, you have to like cover these faces because there's like gas coming out, and you have to cover them with rocks, and that'll make the monster stop. And you have to do that throughout the entire cave, and you'll get this really great armor. But we have this dragon, and we're flying. And now we can actually reach this one area that we could not, which is the highest point in the game. It is called Crocodipolis, which is a weird name.
That is
right?
such a weird name. It sounds like something that should be a casino in a kid's show.
Yeah, definitely. And so here you realize that this is the place where you were taken as a slave. And at this point, you can get the Zenithian armor. You need the ultimate key to do that. You get the Zenithian armor for your son, and now he's pretty much decked out in all Zenithian gear. But you find out that your mother, and I'm putting this in air quotes, you obviously can't see it, but your mother is there, and you talk to this lady who's pretty much leading this cult or this order. It's called Zugzwan, the Order of Zugzwan, which is like evil. You hear about it all over the place as you're traveling the world, especially in the 3rd generation, as you like explore older places that you've been. You hear about a lot of the people because they hear about all this bad stuff happening, and they're like, the only thing that can save you is the Order of Zugzwan.
Mm.
And so you find out your mother is there, and you say, "Hey, you're not my mother." And the lady who's there is like, "Oh yeah, look, you saw through my ruse," and turns into a big old monster called Queen something. I forget what the name, Queen something, and pretty much another chess piece. And so you fight this creature, you defeat her, and pretty much all the like people that are there are like, "Oh my god, what the hell happened?" Right. And they kind of give you a clue to like where to find the leader guy, because I guess you gotta find him for some reason, because at this point you see your wife as a stone. Yes, as a stone statue, and you're like, how the hell do we get her to being unstoned? So they're like, oh, maybe you gotta fight the leader guy here. So you find the stairs, you go downstairs, and you actually revisit parts of where you were a slave. So it's kind of like shocking, kind of like to like relive that part.
Right. Yeah.
And when we get to the bottom, we actually find what the heck is his name? We find pretty much the leader of the Order of Zugzwan, and he's kind of like, interestingly enough, he's kind of more of a fair guy, because he's like, okay, I'll heal you up, and then you're gonna fight me. So this guy, he's pretty tough because he has all kinds of different like breath attacks and everything. But when you take him down, he says something about like, okay, I'll give you access to the evil world. But then all of a sudden, Bishop Laja comes and destroys him.
Right, yeah.
And you're left with this ring that I guess he had, that I guess belonged to your mother. So as you're leaving, your mother pretty much her voice comes through the ring, and she's like, oh my god, don't come here because I'm gonna keep him at bay. Don't worry about it. And so you kind of defy her, and you head back upstairs to where magically your wife turns back from stone into a person.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, the family is reunited, right?
Yes.
And that's a pretty nice moment. And interestingly enough, at this point, you don't have to take your wife. I mean, you can actually change. The party up again. And if you don't want, you don't have to take your wife.
Right.
So you have to go. You pretty much have to. You find out that you have to go to that big cave again, where there was that area where you couldn't get into.
Mm-hmm.
And so you sail there in your boat, and you get into this altar area where there's 3 women who have their fingers out where you have to put the rings. So in the beginning of the game, if you remember, it had the hands of the Heavenly Bride, and then it was 3 circles. That was what the 3 rings meant. Is you had to put the fire ring, the water ring, and the life ring, and you had to put these 3 rings on the statues.
Right.
And then after that, you go into the evil world, which is called Nadiria. And this is the final area, the underworld as they call it. And there you meet up with you can get to one town. It's called Precaria. This is a town where your mother pretty much made like a sanctuary, where all the people in the town actually used to be monsters, and they at some point were able to transform into humans for either being good or something. I'm not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
They pretty much staying good. And so if you think back to Healy back in the day, I guess in Dragon Quest IV, I guess if he just stayed on the good path for so long, he probably could have turned into a
Right,
human.
because that was a theory that Healy had that had no support to it at all.
Right.
We were wondering, okay, so because eventually he did wind up becoming human, which I guess when he got hurt, he kind of felt bad for himself. He was like, oh, I can't heal myself anymore.
Yeah. I wonder if he lost those powers when he became human.
You would think.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Then again, I'm thinking to Dragon Quest VII, like if you change classes, that you do keep your abilities. So
right,
he might have been able to keep it.
Yeah, I could see him definitely keeping something. But so from this town we head north to this giant mountain path called Mount Zugzwan, and then from there we go through the final level, or the final dungeon, which includes going through, poisonous traps around mountains. And then halfway through, you actually see this lady there who's surrounded by a couple of monsters. You defeat these monsters, and finally, after all this time, you're able to fulfill that promise that you made. Well, I mean, granted, you didn't really make a promise. You were knocked out. But you were able to fulfill this wish from your mother.
Right.
And so there's this nice scene where you are talking for a moment, and then she's like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna try and seal the." At this point, you find out the bad guy, the Lord of the Underworld. His name is Nismo. And she's like, don't worry, I'm going to try and seal his powers. So she starts to do this. And at this point, the Gemma, Bishop Laja, I'm sorry, I keep saying Gemma. That's his name in the original. But
okay.
Laja comes and he hits her with another big-ass fireball, pretty much similar to what hit your dad. Right? So you're like, you mother effer. You're killing all my family. And so you fight him for the final time. You finally defeat this son of a bitch, but it's not enough because your mother gets up and she's like, I'm badly damaged, but I'm really going to try and stop this Nismo guy. And at this point, if you were, because you're like the silent protagonist or whatever, if it was me, I'd be like, Ma, you did enough. All right, let's take it easy.
Right.
So she gets hit by Nismo, this giant energy from Nismo, and she dies, and you see, like, in ghostly form, her and your dad, they kind of, like, get back together, and then they disappear.
Right.
And everybody's sad at this. Everyone's kind of really sad at this moment. And so you kind of, you keep going through the dungeon. You have to find, like, the special water to put out, like, this giant fire thing. And then finally you get to the end of the game, or the end of the dungeon where you have to fight Nismo himself. You get a lot of great treasures in this place too. You know, obviously it's the final dungeon.
Yeah.
But you get to Nismo, and if you found out through like some of the town, the final town Precaria, you kind of found out that he was actually a Loftian. He used to live where your mother lived, and pretty much he kind of like, instead of focusing on his good energy, he was like a negative guy, and that's why he got banished to this place. And so he actually wants to be like this evil dude. And so he used to be human, but now he's a monster.
Right.
So you
he
fight him.
Transformed himself there.
Yes. And so you fight him, and he has two forms. He's this old man who kind of looks like Piccolo, and you beat him, and then he turns into this big giant, I think, pink dude. And then you fight him and you defeat him. So after that, you know, obviously at this, you know, he's not, again, he can be a little difficult, but nothing too difficult. So you beat him. The Zenithian, you go back to Zenithian Castle, and then you pretty much do the obligatory Dragon Quest ending where you go around the various towns and you talk to everybody and they tell you how awesome you are.
Right.
And so at the end of the game, you know, you go to like Bianca's hometown. You go to like Mostaferrado. You go to
No, wait, when you say Bianca's hometown, do you
where
mean
she
where
lives
the inn what
now?
where
I
the
mean,
inn
I'm
was,
sorry,
or
where
do
she
you
lives
mean...
now.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, I hadn't given any indication that her father even knew that she was turned into stone for all these years.
Right. Yeah. So back when we met, after, if you went to go visit that town while like she was turned into stone, he would mention on like how he's like, oh, where's Bianca? And he's like, oh, I'm not worried, you'll find her or whatever. And he's actually training another guy to. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, he basically trained a person to become like an innkeeper.
Okay.
So he doesn't even notice that she's gone.
See, I kind of looked at that of him like, oh, my daughter's a statue now, as like his receipt for not being invited to the wedding.
Right,
like,
right.
Fuck this, like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So you do all the visiting around. There's a like a kind of like a group dance at the end.
If you go back.
What happened? Say that again.
Oh, what ends up happening is you're dancing, and this is an interesting or funny little thing. Like if you have Deborah and she's your wife, you'll actually have Deborah. She'll be the lead versus, you know, the man is the lead or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. But anyways, if you either you're all dancing, having a great time, and then you hear like your dad and your mom talking and saying like, oh, you know, it looks like they're gonna do well. We raised good kids, da 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 da, and then it goes away, and then, you know, you get the leaf petals, and it pretty much shows you all the important parts of the game, like you with your dad, you meeting Harry, your dad dying, then you getting married, and then like all this cool stuff, all the interesting scenes and stuff. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention was that they had Santa Rosa was rebuilt. You went back there and everybody was really happy about that. And then the last thing I will mention is after the game is over and you save the game or whatever, there's actually a bonus dungeon which you can go through, and you'll actually fight Eastark, who is one of the main bad guys in Dragon Quest IV.
Right.
Yeah, and if you beat him in a certain amount of time, you can get like a good thing. But it's pretty cool to see his cameo in this game.
Yeah, definitely. If I remember correctly, I feel like he didn't do much though the last game. Wasn't he the one that was asleep? And it was a pretty. Wasn't he the one that was asleep? Did they wake him up? I don't remember now. All of a sudden.
Yeah, that he was actually the original Lord of the evil guy, the Lord of the Underworld or whatever. And you pretty much, the destiny in that game was you pretty much were the chosen guy to defeat him, but after you defeated him, there was like this whole other evil that no one saw coming, you know, with Necrosaro or Sorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, he was asleep. He actually is asleep in this game when you talk to him. I think sometimes he starts off being asleep, which is kind of fun.
This guy sleeps so much.
Yes, he does.
What are your overall? Well, I know your overall thoughts. You love the game.
Yeah.
Like, what's your favorite aspects of it? I guess I would ask then.
I would honestly say it's the story, and I love the fact that it goes through 3 generations and that you could choose a bride. I mean, even though choosing a bride is not, very like depending on what bride, it doesn't really, it doesn't change the overall story.
Well,
But
yeah, yeah.
I just think it's really awesome. Like at that point, I've never seen a game that does something like that, and like I said, I really like the story. Like, and just from the like opening scenes and stuff like that, it's just really great.
Yeah. I mean, I really, like I said, I like the whole generational thing. The bride thing is interesting. Um, the monster recruiting is a little interesting because this is like you weren't I'm not used to having like a monster recruitment thing. 'Cause I've never really been a big fan of the Dragon Quest Monster series, I believe it is.
Right.
So like this is having it in this game, I thought was a little bit interesting. But yeah, I think for me the best aspect is the story, by far.
Yeah.
So all right, it's time to head out here. Let's get some final plugs as we conclude Dragon Quest V.
Yeah, so I've been Kenshin1913, and you can check me out on YouTube at Kenshin1913, at Facebook at Kenshin1913, and at Twitter at Kenshin1913. I also have a store on Etsy if you just look up Kenshin1913, and Patreon if you want to help support me. That's a cool thing at Kenshin1913 as well. And I will be I will be doing Dragon Quest 6, starting a new LP of that. So maybe eventually in the future we can talk about that as well.
Yeah. Also, so definitely keep track of how many modes of transportation is in that game.
Yes, I will.
Since we think that has the most. All right, everyone. I'll catch you next time for the next show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Jim Boy Star podcast. Please visit the website www.thatspodcasting.com, where you can get the latest news on all of the latest upcoming episodes of this show. And you could download the archives of previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher for the latest episodes coming right to you right when they're released. You can also follow me at www.twitter.com/JimBoyStar. This is my story, and thank you for being a part of it.